I think obviously we had always known we were going to do that. We were going to change it into a film. So there was, a lot of thinking about how we shot it was always going to be kind of, have we got enough to cut this together to be a film? There was also the pressure of producing a live performance, which meant, for example, that we have a lot of talky scenes, which maybe doesn't feel as cinematic. So I think that was what really led me to kind of go, okay, let's film noir this, let's have a kind of genre where there are big talky scenes and that's dramatic. And so that sort of really lent itself into this kind of, let's go to this black and white stylized kind of place. Not over stylized, but it felt like that was something we were going to have to accommodate with these long chunky scenes. After we did it, so obviously there were so many logistical challenges in putting the live show on. Locations and cameras and actors and costumes and moving everyone around and just sort of making it feel like a film, because that was the idea, was it felt like a live film. But then obviously when you have the film and you start cutting it together, you don't have the film, because it is a different thing. It does make you realise it was done very quickly. It was kind of from a year from, shall we do Jekyll and Hyde to, and it's on, so the lack of development and, all those things, all the decisions were made really quickly, which was great and it gave it all this energy. But then in post you were kind of like, okay, what is missing here? And so actually at that point we brought a new editor on to who had nothing to do with the live show and because Rachel had been working with us throughout and doing a terrific job helping kind of assemble it and putting it together, and we did it. Then we brought someone else on who kind of was like, oh, this is a film, and sort of, cut it together, put a whole load of new music on, kind of lent into the kind of comedy of it a bit more than we had maybe on the night, and sort of found different ways of looking at some of the scenes, which was really helpful. And then we'd always wanted, and originally had planned to shoot a lot more about the city beforehand to include in the live show, but we hadn't, the pressures of doing this project were enormous, so we hadn't pulled that off. So we then did 2 days of extra shooting around the city. We added a couple of scenes. There were some scenes that were by necessity live and shot on the night, kind of around Lee Theatre, and so you could tell they were all in one building, so we wanted to lift those out and reshoot them in different places to just make it feel a bit more like a film, a bit more beautiful, make the most of the city. So at that point then we also had a new composer came on and did some more music. But we were always working with the DNA of the project, which was that it was inherently theatrical. It was inherently kind of, as I say, these kind of big scenes and led by these performances and dialogue that was kind of driving the action. Because we did a few days of what in theatre world they call development, which is being in a space with actors and reading it through and reading the book and working. We worked with Philip Howard, who's the incredible sort of theatre genius, and we really looked at the book, and the book was the thing that kind of obsessed me, because I'd actually never read it before. Like I suspect most people, right? We all know the story, and reading it, I just was so compelled by this idea of it being a crime story and having a detective and it being a kind of serial killer thriller, which is a genre that we love in cinema, right? So I was kind of like really into that. And obviously because it was the National Theatre of Scotland and, we wanted to make the most of it, it just, as we discussed some of the themes that were really interesting to Vlad and I, it just was really exciting to look at it through Edinburgh's kind of lens. So the ideas of power and kind of prosperity and the sort of inequity between those who have and make decisions in society and those who work and enable anything to happen. Looking at Edinburgh's history from when Stevenson was alive, we just got really excited by it and thought this works really well. And then, I think we went into the kind of the Carew of it, who in the book is a very minor character. He's just someone who gets killed. We never really meet him. And it just was, as you're fleshing out the book, because the book is really sparse, very short, you're kind of grasping for characters to fill this world. And so we just started to make Carew one of these kind of, big businessmen of the city, one of the kind of great, I can't think of the word, the entrepreneurs, and he has this brewery, and then we decided that Carlton Hill, which is just this very great Edinburgh kind of story, the shame of Edinburgh, this building that was built and it was never finished, and it sort of learning about how that happened and just building that into the story felt like it was just so rich with all these things. And I think also to celebrate Stevenson's Scottishness, this was written actually before Sherlock Holmes. Obviously Conan Doyle lived around the corner from Stevenson, it was kind of amazing. And so I think there was something about that felt really important. And we actually ended up shooting some of the material in Stevenson's childhood home in Heriot Row. So that was really nice, So we kind of lent into that, and then just finding the history of the city and building that in was great. During lockdown, spent so long here, kind of wandering around and discovering new areas of the city and the history. And we kind of walked everywhere, and we fell in love with these kind of graveyards. And there's a graveyard in the city, Warriston Cemetery, and there's a big patch in the middle of grass where we would sit and have our picnics until someone told me that was the plague pit. And it was kind of like, oh. And then I started kind of getting really into plague pits and Brunsfield Links, the kind of, that's all plague pit. That's kind of literally bodies under there, and just, it was so fascinating thinking of the ghosts of Edinburgh kind of really rising and, becoming part of this story. It was sort of, that was a very evocative image for us. So it wasn't just the look of it, but it was the kind of the history and it just lent itself so well to the themes of the story that we ended up with. It was our intention was to kind of go, let's look at, big powerful monsters and how they've kind of always been there, and that how they always sort of seem to be around in Britain in this very kind of, the sort of class structures that we live with. So that was, very intentional. Edinburgh is the absolute perfect home for this film. We're so thrilled that this is where it's premiering. We're an Edinburgh gang, the producer, the star, we're all from Edinburgh. And we shot it here. And so as someone who worked for the festival for years and who's been here in many different ways, it's just a real privilege and a joy that the festival was able to happen this year and that we were able to be part of it. So I'm just, over the moon. I think as well, having had the live version of this performance in Lee Theatre, it's nice to sort of bookend the project's life like that. I think film festivals are absolutely at the heart of the ecosystem of independent cinema. I think it's where people meet, it's where people find their tribes. It's certainly where I started working in cinema and realised that filmmakers were normal people, and you could do this, and you meet amazing, extraordinary filmmakers who are willing to lend you a conversation and make you see the industry in a different way. Whenever I work with students or young filmmakers, I'm like, go and work at a film festival. It's where you will start to understand how the industry works. You understand about financing. You understand about exhibition and distribution. It's a kind of space where you can join all the dots and really kind of understand how each of them takes ownership of a project at different stages in its life, and how many people you need to make a film happen. So I think they're crucial, and I think having filmmakers, international filmmakers, come to the city is massively important as well. I remember Miguel Arteta coming here and talking to me about the light and saying how he wants to shoot a film here. I think it's an opportunity to kind of, for people to explore the city and Scottish culture and kind of engage with it. I'm absolutely convinced that film culture is so much poorer when we don't have film festivals. And, as a filmmaker, I love it. I love going around, seeing the world, but also understanding different cultural spaces. You go to a film festival in Greece and you kind of, which are the films that resonate with audiences there, and, how do exhibitors work there. You go to Rotterdam, you see something, you know what I mean? It's a really crucial thing, and I just think they're so valuable. As someone who's worked here as well for this film festival for a long time, and then staying and working here in the city, so many of my colleagues are now working in cultural institutions in this city, and it's an amazing kind of touch point for people who will learn so much from it. You know, it's working at a film festival, you're not going to make a lot of money, but so it tends to be young people who are kind of starting out on their journeys, and you know, they go on and share this knowledge and the love of cinema and the love of the festivals kind of out into the world afterwards.